This is Talking My Walking. I am Rodrigo Ribeiro, and today I'm going to talk about the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressed is the mind of the oppressed, Steve Biko. I believe that most of us, or maybe everyone, believes this quote is pretty accurate, but it has a lot of layers. Because who are the oppressed? And what is actually mind control? How does the oppressor really controls the mind of the oppressed? This is not as easy and as straight, linear as we might think at first glance. And one question to me that I think we should start with the question, why mind control? Yes, because just think about you or me or any. Why do we need to control the mind of everyone? Or of somebody? If we want and feel the need to control the mind of whoever it is, it's because we want to have power over them. We want to be able to exploit them, to use them. That's no other way. We might use excuses or justifications to say that, okay, we need power because without power there is the need to control people because otherwise people would this and that. Of course we need organization. A society doesn't work without organization. And there is always some form of power in any organization because there are rules and norms and laws and they need to be enforced, which means power, which means the use of power. But the problem is not that. The problem is why mind control? Not because power doesn't have to exist in one form or another. Because that's as a social species as us, that live in complex societies, it requires some form of hierarchy. When I'm talking about the hierarchy, I'm not talking about a hierarchy based on wealth and power, but the hierarchy based on respect. Because it has to be based on the respect of the dignity of life, of human life, and every form of life that exists on this earth, even the ones that we might find disgusting. The exploited and the oppressed not necessarily feel that they are being exploited and oppressed. And that's the real power of mind control. That's when the targets don't even understand that they are being used and abused, because they might even have some enjoy some privileges, as many of people that call themselves middle class or upper middle class and the professional managerial class, they enjoy they have privileges and and they have rights, and they feel free and a lot. But even those are used, and if they do not play according to the rules of the game, which is rigged, they will feel then the oppression will become real and obvious. And of course, there are many people that understand it, but since they are benefiting with the system, and since many of them have invested all their lives studying and then building a career and all of that to become somebody in society, they will deny that they are exploited or oppressed, which means in this case exploitation and oppression is in the form of when we self-censored ourselves, and we do not allow ourselves to tell the truth or to be ourselves in order to enjoy the privileges. So we become a fake, a persona. We become a character. Not exactly we play a role, but we don't are exactly a human being, a free human being, as the freedom is not only about free speech or free movement. It's about the possibility of being ourselves all the time, in every circumstance. That's especially when we need to confront power. That's when we confront power that we will see if we are being oppressed or we are denying ourselves the right to be ourselves in order to have some benefits, in order to be rewarded by the system that in the end will oppress or deny you the freedoms that you believe you own or you have and enjoy. True freedom comes with the responsibility to fight for the right to be authentic all the time, in every circumstance, not only when it is convenient. That's why oppression and exploitation can be very nuanced. It's not only about it's not only straightforward, which means it's not always obvious. That is why diversity and pluralism in liberal societies is usually identified as freedom, but it actually is also part of the game of there are implicit manipulation, and it's a much more refined and sophisticated ways to control people, to control the mind of people, and at the same time giving them the impression they are enjoying freedom. But that's a fake freedom again. That's a fake, because the problem is just to entertain people, to keep people, to instrumentalize people in ways that they do not feel the need to go deep into the roots of the problems, because they always understand. They understand that they think they understand the problems without the need to go deep and have a comprehensive analysis of these problems. And we see it everywhere, that the group thinking, tribalization, and or atomization, for example, and people do not just start to not really wanting to see the picture, but to be emotionally to bond emotionally with specific ideologies or specific perspectives of understanding the reality, and they feel as if they understand reality by only seeing through those lenses, that perspective, which is not, of course, doesn't give us the full picture, which is very difficult to understand. That's why the control of the mind of the oppressed is not it's more like a web of deceit. It's not exactly that from there are many different and even opposing views that seem that exist that in some ways give us the impression of democratic discussion, but in the end none of them give us a view of a real life without oppression and exploitation, because that is taken as part of the game. We already believe it is implicit that exploitation and oppression is part of the game. There is nothing we can do to eradicate it, and we already start not seeing. Many of us feel that okay, this exists, but me or the loved ones are not exact. I can manage to avoid to be a target, to be negatively affected by it, and that of course is not true, or at least is not because then we never feel the need to fight for a different system, and then we participate. We are agents. Our agency is used to reinforce the power of those that exploit and oppress us. That's how we use our political and social and cultural and even economic agency. And sooner or later, if not us, just see the example of the United States. The boomers, that's the case that the parents, that we have supposed that the society, the technological advances and the economic growth and this and that will make the life of the next generation better than the generation before. But it's not happening like that. And why is it? Because they took for granted something that was not granted. Because they didn't fight for a better society. They fight for their self-interest by buying into the idea that there is no alternative. I remember to there was a quote or a phrase or something that democracy is not good, but is the best system we can have, blah, blah, blah. Okay, what kind of democracy? And democracy for whom? In the name of what? We cannot talk about democracy or freedom without understanding it in relation with what? Because again, I have to repeat this again and again, everything is relational. You know, if we don't understand it like that, and we talk about democracy and freedom in an abstract way, we don't understand, we don't even know what we are talking about. Because there is no democracy. How can we talk about democracy if there is no economic democracy, if there is no participatory democracy, participatory economics? We have a culture that is an imperialistic culture, a culture that transforms us into mindless consumers, and a culture of infotainment, which makes us be followers of celebrities, to idolize them, you know, actors and sports people, and, you know, all kinds of celebrities, and so-called charismatic leaders. What is that? There is only one thing that matters, or three things at least: truth, justice, and trust. And trust plays an important role, because we need trust in our lives. And if we cannot trust the institutions, if we cannot trust how society is organized, if it's organized against us, if it's organized to control us, to give the opportunity to the oppressor to control and exploit us, where is the freedom and the democracy? It just doesn't exist. It is just a facade. Our main role is the pursuit of our self-interest, whether in businesses, or our professional career, or whatever we do with our lives. Because when we search for to become famous and to become a celebrity, it's because we don't that's what we believe it's right. We don't feel dignity in being an anonymous, in being just one person that doesn't have more value just because he has 1 million followers. The value of our lives is in how we stand for truth and justice. And it is important to understand that, as I repeat again and again, we all are bits and pieces of other people's knowledge and experience. But it doesn't mean that some of us should be more important or be idolized just because they had the opportunity or the luck to be more intelligent, for example, or to have opportunities in life. The circumstances of their lives just allowed them to be more, to have the opportunity to learn, to have time, to use the time of their lives time is life. To learn, to not necessarily struggle for survival by doing some blue-collar job or other kind of jobs. You know, I need time to do what I'm doing. I need to feel my mind to be free of certain things. If I am too worried, or if I am if my mind is busy with other stuff, I cannot do a proper reflection in what I want to reflect about. That's why it's important. Freedom is also the opportunity to reflect, to use our discernment to really understand the complexity of the system where we live, to go to the roots of the problems, because it's the only way that we can find our way, that we can really understand what's at stake. What kind of society would you like to live, and why? And how can we achieve it? How can we discuss? We cannot have democracy and we cannot enjoy freedom if we are not educated. And by education I mean indoctrination, because we are always indoctrinated, but we can be indoctrinated for liberation or for enslavement. And the kind of indoctrination that we should go through, which means the process of domesticating us, because we are cultural beings, so therefore we are domesticated beings. It should be to make us critical thinkers, to make us as possible, because I mean every one of us is different, so therefore we are not supposed to expect all of us to be interested in deep thinking, but we need the basis to be skeptical in a constructive way in order to understand, in order to avoid. Because if we really care about democracy and freedom, we need to avoid society to be taken by the people, by opportunists that usually they lack. They have sometimes, or most of the time, sociopathic or psychopathic tendencies. They only care about themselves, which means their objectives. That's what matters. Nothing else matters. The amount of suffering, destruction they can cause, it doesn't matter. And because that's why they know they need to use mind control, which means they need to tell a story that makes us accomplices of them. It's one of the most impressive forms of mind control. That's when we believe that we are also junior partners of the elite. We are not part of the ones that are exploited. We are also under the stress and all the austerity measures and the manufactured scarcity that makes us that makes us not have time for many things we would like to do. But nevertheless, we don't feel as if we are exploited or oppressed. This is really genius. We have to be fair. It's often the classes. I mean, they can be from left or right. It doesn't matter. They are often already the reason why there is the right-wing politics are always associated with the wealthy of the country, and that's why most of the dictatorship are right-wing, because it's the control of the state by the wealthy. And in many countries of the global south, this means that the oppression and exploitation and the enclosure of the commons, which means the control of the property and the wealth by the few, and by depriving the many of the means to live, it is more obvious. But there are also the cases where left-wing take the power, and then they become authoritarians, they become kleptocrats. And this is, in my opinion, the example of what is really example of treason. And that's why it's one example for me when these right-wing nationalists and populists, that not in every country, not in every case, okay? I'm not trying to put everybody in the same basket, but many of them, they are willing to help foreigner interests, corporations, which means the oligarchs and plutocrats are going to benefit by making arrangements with foreign entities, governments, corporations, and other organizations, including the IMF or the World Bank, or private financial institutions, to allow the control of economic assets, property, land, infrastructure, and other energy and other assets that should be under sovereign control. And by doing it, they make sure that themselves, the elite, this oligarchic and plutocratic elite, also enjoys the benefits. They enrich themselves by impoverishing the people and allow foreign entities to control the economic sovereignty of the country. And that is done in the name of to fight communism and to fight leftism. That sometimes is not leftism at all, it's just neoliberalism. And the thing they can, again, they can instrumentalize people that are exploited and oppressed by this class, but nevertheless they do not understand that they are supporting by voting on them to give them legitimacy to control power, to become government. And then they will, it's not because that everything these governments, these populist far right nationalist governments, that everything they do is wrong. It's not what I'm trying to say. Is this that usually these elites, the plutocrats and oligarchs, align themselves with the international elites of plutocrats and oligarchs, especially with the Western elites. And because they prefer to do it like that than to allow the wealth to be distributed, to make the universal basic services work, to lift people out of poverty. And that's why this contradiction, this paradox that allows them this kind of mind control of the oppressed, that transforms the oppressed into tools of the oppressor. We have the case of Brazil with Lula, or Dilma Rousseff, or Bolivia, or Ecuador, or any other country that in the past was the target of the CIA coup, like Salvador Allende, or Mossadegh, or in Indonesia, Sukarno, I guess, if I'm not mistaken, and other places where legitimate there were also nationalistic kind of but not for the elites. I mean, at least they wanted to develop their economies, which is not the case in many times of the right wing, because it's about control. You know, fascism, according to Mussolini, is a fusion between corporations and the government. That's what fascism is, and that's what we have now. These guys at democracy in the West. This is a situation that we need to tackle. We can, because where are, especially here in Europe and the northern and in the USA, where is this going to lead us? Then we have the kind of economics, we have a kind of political economy that is leading us to political fascism, to fascism, to techno-fascism, which is a more which means that more control, more mind control, more effective control, social and cultural control, which means mind control. Because cultural control is mind control. And that was the most important weapon of the United States, especially after the Second World War, was the cultural imperialism, a very successful campaign to sell the American dream to everyone around the world. This successful consumer society where everyone could become rich or something like that. So but the problem is the Chinese system, or the Chinese alternative. I'm not even talking about India, because India is not an example of it's a bad example, and there is no other countries, or Russia. This is not example. Russia might be an example of a country that stands for their interests and sovereignty, okay, but it's not an example for the future of humanity. That's what many people get wrong. And the Chinese is the same. Is the kind of is this hubris of growth, or technofixism, of unhinged economic growth and consumerism. This is not the way to become free. This is the way to perpetuate the system of oppression. It might not seem like that now, because China is growing, but there will be the point when it will achieve the top. And now everybody thinks that everybody is kind of enjoying the pie is growing, and so they are enjoying it. And there are many things the Chinese government and the Chinese society that is doing that is good. But the model itself, the economic model, it's not the economic model for the future, for an ecological civilization. They might call it is a confusion that we believe that an ecological civilization it is basically a technological civilization, which means that green technology and green growth will make it's what makes us will allow us to achieve an ecological civilization. I'm not against technology, because it would be even stupid to be against technology, because we are not going to change, because this technological civilization we cannot eradicate it, but we should see it through different lenses, not be as influenced and as dogmatic as we are about technofixism and technoscientism, which for a technocratic or techno-fascist and transhumanist society and civilization, this is again mechanisms for mind control. That serve the oppressor, for as long as a society. And that's why we need to understand the dynamics of class or caste-based societies. This is impossible if we want to maintain this system, this paradigm. We can never be free. The many we can never really use our lives to develop ourselves as human beings instead of tools to serve a system. But it's not to serve a system, it's to serve the accumulation of wealth and the concentration of power in the top of the pyramid by the few. And that's why this is wrong. That's why we have wars. The war in Ukraine is a war that expresses, not in this case, is not a war between two opposed oligarchic elites. That doesn't mean that which is in this case, particular case, is the resistance against unipolarism, is the birth of a multipolar order. But most of the time, the wars are wars of resistance, and are wars that are caused by the oligarchic and plutocratic elites with opposed interests or conflicts of interest, and they rather they make sure that they don't want to lose the grip on power. And that's why we need to understand that behind most wars, the wars that are not wars of resistance against an existing power that wants to take control of everything, against colonialism, against imperialism, the wars only happen when the two different groups of plutocrats and oligarchs are confronting each other, and they provoke a war in order to settle, to kind of shuffle the power in order to initiate, to make a new order. That usually nothing changes, because the elites who controls society and who shapes civilization is the same elites. If not the same people, it's the same elites. It is the plutocrats and the oligarchs. It doesn't matter if they are Americans or British or from other European nations or from China or from India or elsewhere. We are the victims. Every single human being that dies in Ukraine right now is a victim of this war. Of a war that is always the plutocratic, the oligarchs and plutocrats against the rest of us. The origins, that is the origin of the. This is a war of resistance. The Russians just decided that they were not going to allow the Western powers, the Western oligarchs and plutocrats to control, to to menace the integrity and sovereignty of Russia. So this is not exactly a war between two different groups of oligarchs and plutocrats, two opposing groups. And that's how we need to understand this war. That's why it is wrong to demonize Russia in spite of Russia being the invader. The war was already, the invasion, it was not the starting of the war. The war was already going on. That's what people do not understand. Many people don't understand that the war was already going on. The invasion was just a decision to get it, to make it, to control it. That's why, and the war was not a war, and it is not a war between Russia and Ukraine. It is a war, as many defend, and I agree with that, it is a war between NATO and Russia. And NATO represents the Western elites, the Western oligarchs and plutocrats. This is the reality. They do not represent values. By the way, they represent values. They represent the values of control of wealth accumulation and the concentration of power. Not freedom, not democracy, not human rights, not justice. That's bullshit. That's part of the problem. That's part of what I'm trying to debunk. No, that's part of the mind control of the oppressed and exploited, which are us. That they can't control our minds, they can't control, they manipulate perception to manufacture consent with giving us the impression that this is our true opinions, that we know we are not, our opinions are free. The sides we pick, we do it out of our freedom of thought, which is not true for none of us. I don't pretend to be 100%. My thoughts are not free, they are relational. My reasoning doesn't come out of my intellectual integrity, because my intellectual integrity or my intellectual honesty is not free, is influenced, is biased. What I can do and what we all should do is try to do our homework. In order to not be influenced by shallow understanding and fragmented understanding of the reality. That's why holistic thinking is part of any critical analysis. We need comprehensive understanding with historic context, and other contexts Because there is nothing easier than having opinions. That's why opinions are free. You don't need to pay for them. Nobody needs to pay to just listen to some opinion, unless we have to go to a doctor or to a lawyer or something like that. But that's why opinions are meaningless. But they can be very destructive if we take them seriously. There has never been the amount of disinformation and misinformation and perception manipulation that we find in the internet, disguised as freedom of thought, disguised as alternative media. It's mind-boggling. And so many of us just take it as the truth. Opinion makers are everywhere. No, they are not only legacy media, they are everywhere. But they are also part of the problem of the success of the mind control of the oppressed, and that's another layer of difficulty that for most of us is not clear, is not really, we don't see it. This is why the mind control of the ones that do not feel that they feel themselves as free thinkers, the ones they have free choice, they live in democracies, they are smart, they are informed, they are sophisticated, they are not easily manipulated, and therefore they are not victims of mind control. And nothing could be further from the truth. And that's why it works. It works pretty well. And that's why we don't have, that's why we go from, that's why we are moving from liberalism and neoliberalism, or let me leave fascism to techno-fascism. Neoliberalism has been a liberal fascist regime, fascist regime, that is now moving into techno-fascism. That some people call techno-feudalism. It doesn't matter to me. It's techno-fascism. And we still, and then that's why we don't see any other choice, but the choice we see is to support nationalist and populist and even fascistic far-right movements and political parties, because they are the ones that are going to restore order and values and to make the economy work and to get rid of the corrupt, to fix corruption and all those problems that so many people see, and which I agree, immigration is a problem, but it is not the problem as they tell us. They want us. They are using immigration as scapegoating, for scapegoating. Tackling the immigration problem is not the same as attacking immigrants or making the immigrants the scapegoats. And we should not buy into it. But it doesn't matter. Because that's how mind control works. For those that don't even see themselves as oppressed, then don't perceive themselves as oppressed and as exploited. That's why it is even more efficient. It's more effective. And that's where we are. And this is a situation that we either we reflect and have a conscious transformative process that allows us to understand the reality as it is, or there is no other solution in my perspective. Because there are a multitude of ways to manipulate for perception manipulation, and they are effective because the ones that do it they are very skillful. They have all the knowledge available and the experts, because they have the money to pay. They can buy them. What do we have if we do not really train our critical thinking and analysis and the ability to detect logical fallacies? What do we have? What do we really have? What kind of intellectual tools do we have to be sure that we are not that our minds are not controlled? Do we really think about that? Do we really give it some thought? Do we really even want to understand that we are manipulated? Just because that our sources, all our sources, we can trust all our sources? Just because we identify ourselves with them? Because they seem honest? I think we need to have a deeper, to dedicate more time and energy and intellectual energy to figure out how deep, how indoctrination works. We can't get rid of the dominant narratives that back how we perceive the world and ourselves and influence our relations and everything else. What we can do is to train ourselves to acquire new narratives that will become dominant. And we have to work on those narratives on the basis of truth, justice, and trust, but not blind trust. So because that is the only way that we can understand the reality. It's not by being I mean blind faith and irrational hope doesn't lead us to understanding the reality. It just transforms us in tools that oppressors use. In as many ways as possible, not just by exploiting us as workers, but by confusing us as citizens, as human beings, by dehumanizing us, by transforming us in tools to conquer power and accumulate wealth, transforming us into accomplices that are rewarded with a little portion. But we sometimes feel happy with it because we believe we have some recognition and we have a better life, a better living standard than our neighbor or the other members of our families or whatever it is, because we think we have accomplished something just by serving power. And this is the problem. It is real, this is not fictional. That's so I'm going to end it here for today. Thanks for listening. I will be back soon.